evening and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm your host, Eugene Chan. Our guest tonight is Mr. Shih Wing Ching. He is well known in our city and he's been in the property industry for decades. Over 40 years ago, he founded Centerline Property Agency. Now it is one of the largest in Hong Kong. His experience also extends across Macau and mainland China. Welcome, Mr. Shih.
Hi.
Mr. Shih, it's indeed a privilege to have you here today because your name is synonymous with the property industry, and to us, you are like a guru. That's the reason why we are inviting you to share with your views whether it is still a right time to buy a property in Hong Kong. Last week, the Secretary for Transport and Housing, Mr. Frank Chan, was here, and we were talking about the housing shortage issues, and he assured us that that problem will be solved. So today, we're going to look at a different sector, which is the frontline industry of the property agency. So maybe you can tell the viewers, do we really have to buy a property? Why can't we just rent, just like London or Paris?
I think property is the best asset you can have in your portfolio.
Right.
There's a famous American author called Mark Twain.
Okay.
He said, buy land because God is not producing it anymore. So it's a limited edition.
Right.
No more new supply in future. Mm-hmm. And for property, unlike other assets, they usually depreciate as time goes by. Mm-hmm. But for property, it can appreciate together with the productivity of the people living on that piece of land. I give you an example. Mm-hmm. Like in Shenzhen. When Shenzhen, 40 years ago, I went to Shenzhen and find it's a rice field.
Right.
For rice field, it can produce very little yield every year. Right. So the land is very cheap. But now it become an industrial center, service center, and now they have a high-tech industry, pharmacy industry. Mm-hmm. The productivity of Shenzhen people has gone up so high.
Right.
Then the value of the land, the same piece of land, increase together with the productivity of the people there.
Right.
So if you buy a piece of land in an area you believe the economy is improving, the value of the land and the value of the property will go up together. In most cases, the productivity of the human being increase every year.
Right.
So land can be the best investment you have in your life.
Right. Mr. Shih, you are one of the guests who answered the title of the show right away, saying that it is one of the best investments. However, as you know, Hong Kong, we are getting integrating with mainland China, but their goals is having common prosperity, 共享, whereas Hong Kong is a free economy. Having Hong Kong getting more and closer with the mainland, do you think the thinking of owning a property will change? Do you think there's still investment potential?
Of course, there's still investment potential. Unlike other investment, property is an investment. It can be used, also invest. If you buy some stocks, you can't use it. It just gives you a certificate.
Right.
But for property, you can use it as a dwelling place, and you can use it at the same time as an investment. If you don't live in your own property, you can rent it out and have rental yield.
Right.
No other investment can be used and also have investment return. So you can buy one thing and get two purposes.
Right. So even with Immigrating closely with the mainland, where common prosperity is their objective, you think Hong Kong will still have the investment potential? But not speculation, right?
The Chinese government do not like to see too much speculation in the property market.
Right.
They believe too much resources are going to the property market. They want to have an even distribution of resources in different sectors in the economy. Now China is competing with USA.
Right.
And they said no country can become strong just because you have a good property market. So they want resources go to some other area.
Right, so maybe no speculation, but investment is still have a very good opportunity.
Yes, most of the government in the world encourage people to own their own residence.
Right.
Because when you own a residence, you have a much stronger sense of belonging.
To the
you
place.
will love the place you live. You will try to see the place getting more and more prosperous.
Okay.
So the government like you to have your own property.
Right, Mr. Shih. In September, I read in the Reuters report saying that the mainland officials met with some of our property developers and tycoons and asked them to help to solve the housing shortage in Hong Kong. Do you think that will suppress our property prices in Hong Kong?
It's okay for the government to ask the developer to cooperate to solve the housing problem, because Hong Kong is a capitalist society. All our properties in the private sector are produced by the private developer, so they need the cooperation of the developer to solve the housing problem.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean the Chinese government will order the developer in Hong Kong to sacrifice all their business interests.
Right.
They want to have understanding and
Okay.
cooperation. They are not giving orders.
Right. Right, Mr. Shih. When Secretary Frank Chen was here last week, we were talking about whether the private sector can help the housing shortage issue. And nowadays, we are shifting from 60-40 to 70-30 in terms of building public housing and private housing. Do you think if we give more land to the developer, meaning there'll be more properties in the market in the private sector, do you think they will in turn reduce the price of the property market in the private sector and have less people wanting to go to the public sector? Do you think that will happen?
For me, I would rather to see Hong Kong have a bigger private sector
Right.
than public sector.
Is it because of your own business?
No. Because in public sector, you live in similar size of flat according to the government's policies. For me, the best life is that one can search his own business, pursue his own business. So you can have a difference in your residence depending on how hard you work, how clever you work. When I was young, I find many people would like to have their own property. But if you live in public housing, you can do very little to improve your living environment. You need
So true.
Those politicians to fight for you. Unless the government say, oh, now we change the average living area of the public housing, then you will have a little improvement.
Okay.
But if you live in private sector, you pursue your own happiness.
Right.
So you can have your life in your hand, not have your life in the hand of the politician.
Right. Mr. Shih, in the last few minutes of the first part, since we mentioned about housing shortage, I want to talk about that as well. You know, all the chief executives, all the 4 chief executives we have been trying to say, we must solve the housing shortage in Hong Kong. But the problem seems to be getting worse one after another. I'm sure this is not the intention, but this is what happened. What do you think of, I mean, mainly because we have a shortage of land. Recently, Mrs. Carol Lam mentioned about the Northern Metropolis strategy, as well as the Tomorrowland Tower project. Do you think that's going to work?
Of course, that is going to work. Actually, we have no land shortage in Hong Kong. The problem is that we do not put the needs of the people in the highest priority.
Right.
So if we have a good urban planning, if we position ourselves as a metropolitan, then most of the land shall be used for urban development. But now we treat Hong Kong as an independent country, or even treat Hong Kong as an earth.
Right.
So we will have a lot of space for country park. In New York, you have a Central Park, but you won't have a national park in New York. Your national park will be in Yellowstone, in Alaska. So for Hong Kong, you can't perform all the function as the earth need to perform. So some of our country park can be in the Xinjiang area, or in the northern areas. We can share the responsibility as a man in the world.
Yeah, sorry I have to cut you short here. You've been getting very excited. But let's take a break and don't go away. Welcome back. We have Mr. Shih Wing Ching with us, and he has been giving us his opinion about the housing situation in Hong Kong and the advantages of buying a property. Mr. Shih, before the part one, I was going to ask you one question. Is that the current waiting time for the public housing in Hong Kong is 5.8 years. It's getting more and more. Secretary Frank Chan said it may take another 10 years or more for us to see it coming down. As a property guru, do you have any suggestion to the government how to reduce that waiting time?
You raise the requirement
of getting the public housing
to queue for that for the public housing.
Right.
So the number will drop. If you just ask me the simple question, how can I short the waiting time?
That's exactly my suggestion. And he said that if the market becomes more, the economy getting better, they always consider raising that. And the second thing I want to ask you, we always compare Hong Kong with Singapore. Hong Kong now, we have approximately 50% of the population.
The answer I give you is not a good one. Of course, it's best to increase supply so the people can move in as early as possible. But if you want to shorten the time, then you raise the requirement.
Right. Okay. As I just said earlier about Hong Kong and Singapore, I've done some research for you to comment. About 50% of Hong Kong's population live in their own home, 35% in private sector, and 50% own the subsidized flat. If you come to Singapore, about 80% of the population live in the public flats, where 90% of them will own their own home. And they can always use their central provident fund to help to buy the property. Do you think that Hong Kong can consider using our MPF fund?
Of course, we can consider this.
Is that a good idea?
It is a good idea, but now the government wants to suppress the property price.
Right.
So they are trying to make you difficult to buy a property, not helping you to buy a property. If you want to help them, you can also let them more easily to get a mortgage from the bank. If you let them use the MPF, now is not a good suggestion because the MPF in Hong Kong is barely enough for their retirement life.
Okay.
So better not to use it at
now.
this moment.
Right.
You ask the bank to help rather than using your own money.
Mr. Shih, so far, we haven't touched to the real crux of the matter. I'm sure the viewers will want to know exactly what your answers are. So far, we talked about why we want to buy a property. You said only for living, it's for investment. We touched on the topic on housing shortage. Now I'm going to ask you when to buy, because everybody want to buy at low and sell high, hopefully one day. And everyone say, just like I was in the makeup room, they were saying that now it's too expensive. So shall we wait until the market collapses before we buy? What do you think?
Even I'm very close to market, I'm not sure about the future.
Right.
So as an user, I think most of the people are user rather than speculator or investor. For user, you buy when you need to buy.
Right.
You buy when you have the money to buy. So if you get married, if you have children, you need to buy.
Right.
If you have money, you can buy.
So in other words, you say any time is a good time then, as long as you have the money.
Of course, property has a cycle. It's better to wait until it hit the bottom.
Right, but when?
It's not easy to tell you in such a short time. But for ordinary people, buy it when you really need it.
Okay.
When I want to buy a property, I give the choice to my wife because she used the flat more than I do,
Right,
so
okay.
she know more.
But as you know, interest rate is quite low now. However, in July, Hong Kong property prices is a record high. So with that information in mind, will you still buy now?
The property price in Hong Kong seem to be very high, but actually it rose very little in the past 3 years.
Okay.
And on the other hand, most of the government in the world are printing a lot of money.
Okay.
So the increase in money is faster than the developer building their flats.
Okay.
So money will become less valuable in future.
Right.
So
Mr.
I
Shih.
would rather have a property in hand than holding the cash.
As a professional, I always look at different angles. So I'll keep on asking you questions. As we know, everything, daily life, when we go to have a dinner, everything's getting more and more expensive. So inflation's going to come. So I think most of the major economies, they will increase the interest rate to fight with the inflation. Do you think that will put a brake on the property prices?
When the interest rate rose because of the inflation, sometimes it helped the property price rather than press the property price. Because when you have inflation, property price will usually goes up together with the inflation.
Okay.
So in the past history in Hong Kong, when the interest rate is high, property price is also high.
Right. Mr. Shih, we talked about why you buy a property and when to buy. Now I'm going to ask you where to buy. As I'm sure the viewers and I, we always listen to the word location, location, location. So what's meant by location? Is it close to transportation? Or nowadays, close to, used to be central, where the business district is. Do you still use those two criteria as location?
I will find a location where government is putting a lot of resources there.
Right.
Like South Gate Wan in the past is considered as a remote area in Hong Kong Island. But when you have MTR, you have the East Corridor, then the property value there increase.
Right.
Because the government is investing there.
So if that's the case, we should be buying the new development areas like the Northern Metropolis, like just been mentioned. That may be a good one to buy.
You buy a farmland 2 years ago, I think you have
a very good profit. Yes,
almost double now.
Yes, we also read in the media that there are a lot of people immigrating, leaving Hong Kong. Some say about 90,000 residents. From your industry, do you see that departure of 90,000 people, has it hit the property market?
you can just look at the price level. If there are more people living, less people willing to buy property in Hong Kong, then the price will drop.
Right.
But actually, the price in Hong Kong is still moving up.
Right.
That means those people living in Hong Kong can easily sell their property.
Okay.
So whenever there is a big change in the political environment, property will go from the hands of people who lost confidence to the people
Who have confidence. Just like 1997.
Yes.
Right. Mr. Shih, on the last part of the show, I'm going to ask you how to buy property. But before I'm going to ask you short questions, I want short answers, is that I want to just, to refresh all the viewers' memory. In Hong Kong, it's quite expensive, that usually the average household have to spend 20 years of their salary to buy a 60 square meters flat of, say, 9.6 million Hong Kong dollars. And we spend almost 60% of the monthly income to pay for the mortgage. So this is the background. So
no,
I'm going to ask you.
That's not the background. Actually, over 60% of Hong Kong house owner has already paid up their mortgage.
Okay.
And in general, most of the people are paying less than 30% of their household income for the monthly installment. Right. So they still have a lot of money to spend in other areas.
Right. So, Mr. Shih, I'm going to ask you, what is your advice for a young person in the mid-20s? Should they go to their parents and get some help? Or do they want to get a short-term loan from the bank? Or even get the developer scheme where they can quickly get a flat? What do you think?
They shall concentrate on their own career.
Okay. Do you recommend them stay in the subdivided flats?
Consider buying a flat when you don't have your own career. If you become a professional, you become high management, then you will have no difficulty to buy the flat.
Right, then they can rent a subdivided flat.
Always spending your time to buy the flat, but you cannot afford it, you won't achieve.
Right. How about buying those nano flats? Yes or no?
No.
No, okay. So you want to buy a new flat or second-hand flats?
For me, I will buy the second-hand flat because for new flat, it's always influenced by the developers' marketing policy.
Okay, last question for you. How about for those people close to 60 years of age with their children just come out to work? Would you help them to buy a property now, or you wait until they have a career, as you just said?
I will wait until they have a career.
All right, okay. Thank you, Mr. Shih, for coming. And I'm sure our viewers will have taken note of all the insights into the property market that you have given us. Thank you all for joining us. Have a good week and good night.